Happy Monday. Today we are going to review graph using the slope-intercept form. And remember that form is always in y equals mx plus b. We did this in class and now we're going to review it again to make sure we remember the concept. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to circle for you the slope and the y-intercept. So the slope is 2. Now remember, in slope we want to graph it as 2 over 1 because that is rise over run. So the first thing I do is I come to my graph and I plot the y-intercept, which is positive 1. So remember, this is the y, so I'm going to plot positive 1. And since the slope is 2 over 1, we're going to rise 2 and run 1. That's where they get the term rise over run. You're going to rise 2 and run 1. And then you take a straight edge, and as you know, I'm particular about the straight edge thing. And you draw it, and these must have arrows because they are lines that go to infinity. So they're very simple to graph as long as you get the slope and the y-intercept. So in the next problem, the slope is going to be negative 2. Because remember, it's whatever number is in front of x. And the y-intercept is going to be negative 3. Because in the video from Thursday, we have to take the sign with the number. So this slope is negative 2. So that would be negative 2 over 1. So this is the rise and this is the run. Now, if you're like me, rise seems pretty weird because we're not really going to rise. In this one, we're going to fall because it's a negative. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to plot my negative 3, which is my y-intercept. So I come and I plot negative 3. And remember, that's on the y-axis. And then since my slope is negative 2 over 1, that means I'm going to drop down 2, 1, 2, and over 1. And then I'm going to draw my line. Again, a straight edge is always the best way when you're doing these problems because that way you're more accurate. And then you always have to draw the arrows because these lines are to infinity and beyond. So that's how you do those two examples. Now, the next two examples that we're going to use are a little bit more hard for kids. And the reason why they're hard is because the slope is not apparent to us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remind you that if there's nothing in front of that x, it's going to be a 1. So in this problem, the slope is 1. And the y-intercept is negative 7. So when we look at that, we see that our y-intercept is negative 7. But the first thing we have to remember, well, the slope is 1. So that means it's going to be 1 over 1. Rise over run. So you would plot your negative 7 y-intercept. You always want to plot your y-intercept first. So you're going to plot negative 7. And then since my slope is 1 over 1, I'm going to rise 1 and run 1. And then I'm going to draw my line. Now, some kids want to know, do you have to draw it all the way through the graph? Do you have to draw arrows? Arrows, yes. Through the complete graph, no. You could leave it like that, or you could put it all the way through the graph if you chose to. So that one's a little bit more difficult in the fact that there's a 1 that is implied that we don't see. So the last one, again, this is a negative x, so I'm going to put a 1 there. So my slope is negative 1. My y-intercept, positive 2. So when I write my slope, I'm going to write it as -1 over 1. Rise over run. And again, we're not really rising in this one, we're falling. So we're going to go to +2, our y-intercept, +2. And then I'm going to drop 1 and run 1. And the reason why I'm dropping is because it is a -1. And then again, you take the straight edge, you draw your lines, and then you put your arrows on them. And that is how you graph using the slope-intercept form. So the things to remember are y equals mx plus b, our slope is in front of the x, our y-intercept is at the end, plot the y-intercept first, and then count rise over run, and then draw your line. And the lines must have arrows as they are going to infinity. And that is all we need to know about graphing using the slope-intercept form.